My PhD is in French literature. My dissertation was very literary focused. I used a psychoanalytic approach to analyze some contemporary theater, looking at how French and Francophone authors used the stage as a metaphor for what was happening in the mind. And I still do research on literature, some a lot of contemporary Haitian diaspora literature, particularly literature that's written in Quebec, and other immigrant writing in Quebec. That's a really fun question to think about because I often tell my students I'm of that weird generation where I started college with card catalogs and ended college with like computers telling me how I could find resources. So I was thinking back to my very first real research experiences as an undergraduate, and then how that translated into grad school. And I think it was a lot of sort of playing around and less explicit instruction. But once databases arrived, life became so much easier in terms of finding articles and finding books that you could then order. There was a lot of interlibrary loan involved in my early academic career. But I never had real explicit instruction on where or how you find things unless they were sort of mini workshops in libraries and things like that. But it was one-on-one conversations with mentors, or I found these things and sort of just digging in and swimming in it until you find the things that you need. I think when scholars talk to me and my advisors talk to me and my committee talk to me about how to use it in the discipline, it was really about how are you going to enter into this scholarly conversation? So what has already been said that is relevant to the questions that you're addressing, and then what are you contributing to the conversation? Although the terms like lit review and things like that I've come to know more were not really explicitly talked about in my PhD program as much. And that may be because the background is French, and the French scholars often do things a little differently than US-based American scholars. But it was really what has been said and how can you enter in the conversation, and then what are you contributing that's new? And making sure that you're building on the works of others. And I did find that personally, I work on contemporary literature because I found it really frustrating to try to enter into a conversation where literally thousands of other people had spoken. I can't imagine having written on Beckett or someone that I don't have anything new to add to that conversation, but I really liked the idea of bringing new authors to light, bringing attention to those authors that might then bring them into the classroom so our students can discover more things. So that's one of the reasons that I really appreciate some of the contemporary works that I've studied, is because I think they're brilliant. And also when scholars talk about them, then people discover them. I'd say that my first experiences with SoTL were actually pretty early in my career at Elon. And they sprung from me wanting to write something about some things that I had experienced in a teaching project. So it was a case study type article on using theater in the foreign language classroom. And I really went at it in a similar way that I would do any type of research. I just sort of went into the databases and looked at theater, second language acquisition, or theater language pedagogy, and started using those search terms to see who else was talking about this, who else had done it. But I interestingly didn't do that before I taught the class. In my memory, I maybe looked at one or two articles to think about the structures, but I really spent a lot of time thinking, okay, this is my structure. This is how I want to do this. And it wasn't until I decided to write about it that I went to look at how other people had done it. And I think that now I would say that scholarship informs my praxis, like that I do kind of have a loop as I'm thinking about, okay, how can I make this more inclusive, or this thing is not quite working in my class, what can I do to tweak it? Then I might go and look and see what people are doing and how people are improving their pedagogies. So that's one of the things that I really like about SoTL, is that it sort of closes a loop for me. because I want to be a teacher. Teaching is my passion. And so engaging with other folks who are really thoughtful about their teaching is something that I find actually more interesting on some level and meaningful than just engaging with scholars who are talking about literature, which is interesting to me, but the ripples of it won't be as big. So I also like the community aspect of SoTL, where you can grapple with hard ideas together with colleagues. And you can do that in some disciplinary work, but in the humanities, we are often alone in a room with a text, which I love, but it's not the same kind of love. And it doesn't touch my teaching as much as thinking about those other questions. I think I don't have as much experience searching SoTL literature writ large. I'm often looking at certain questions, but I approach them quite similarly. I'm going to go in. I've also done research recently on global engagement and on ways to deepen the impact of study abroad on students. So I might go into the literature looking for, things like intercultural learning, study away, pre, during, post study abroad, returning from study abroad, impact on learning, and things like that. I mean, I'm going to use the same types of keyword searches when I'm looking in my discipline, but it's a whole other field of knowledge. So figuring out which things I need to read when and which things will serve most the purpose of my article or the arguments that I'm trying to make. It may take me longer actually to do that in SoTL because the conversation can be taking place in a bunch of different spaces potentially than it would in my discipline where most of the conversations are taking place in similar spaces. I think that is one of the challenges of SoTL is that, for example, if you're looking specifically at pedagogies within your discipline, there may be relevant overarching articles out there that you may not run into. I'm in a second language acquisition context, so I can find those articles, but then the intersectionality, I think, of SoTL, like if you're looking at inclusive pedagogies, okay, what's inclusive in one classroom may be inclusive in another, but there may be things that you have to think about slightly differently depending on context. So is a STEM article in inclusive pedagogy going to be applicable to my French class? Maybe, or maybe not. So it kind of takes a little bit more time to think about, okay, what should I read that will inform how I'm talking about these things? And I'm not an expert in that at all, but I do find it sometimes challenging to sort of navigate. Oh, there's a lot on this in a lot of different places. How do we connect the dots best?